All right. Good morning, everyone, and welcome to our February Grand Rounds. I am Carol Rockhill, and along with Michelle Kuhn, I'm a Grand Rounds planner. I want to start with a land acknowledgement. We acknowledge that we are on the traditional land of the first people of Seattle, the Duwamish people past and present, and honor with gratitude the land itself and the Duwamish tribe. And we do know that this acknowledgement does not take the place of authentic relationships with Indigenous communities, but it does serve as one way to honor the land and to resist cultural erasure. We also acknowledge that this country exists and prospered as a result of free enslaved labor of Black people, and we honor the legacy of the African diaspora and Black life, knowledge, and skills that were stolen due to violence and systemic oppression. And we affirm that our commitment is to be aware of our own privilege and of the oppression that exists and existed, and how they play a role in the lives of our patients, families, and employees as we strive to be anti-racist and improve care for those with less privilege. And Catherine, can you advance to the next slide? I do want to highlight that February is Black History Month. And as part of that, there's two links here at the bottom. I wanted to alert people that the one on the right is or the top link, and that's is connected to the picture on the right is a list of resources that Seattle Children's has curated about Black History Month. And the second link, which is tied to the middle picture, is a federal set of resources that's been developed in honor of Black History Month. So today we have a speaker who we're very excited about, who exemplifies a theme that we try to do every Grand Round series of highlighting stars in our own backyard, and whose light and warmth shine not only here in our own community to help patients and families, but also nationally and well beyond our community. And in order to properly introduce our speaker, we have asked Dr. Gonzalez, who is a star here in our child psychiatry faculty and a leader in the program for enhancement of regulation, attention, and learning, the Pearl program. And so I'm going to hand over to Dr. Gonzalez.
Thank you, Carol. Good morning, everyone. I am very happy to introduce Dr. Angelique Day. She is an associate professor in the UW School of Social Work. She's also a faculty affiliate of the Indigenous Wellness Research Institute and Partners for Our Children. Her work...
You're on mute.
Oops, I'm sorry. Did I just get muted again?
I'm sorry, Erin, that was me. I was muting people and I muted you accidentally.
Oh, okay, not a problem. Her work focuses on child welfare policy and practice, and she's developed the National Training and Development Curriculum with the Children's Bureau, which she will be telling us about today. She previously worked in a number of impactful community settings, including as a congressional fellow in the U.S. House of Representatives, developing federal bills based on her own research to address the impact of trauma on distressed communities and trauma training for teachers, as well as bills supporting foster care youth in attending college. Her many grants and impressive publication record focus on the development of culturally adapted and trauma-informed interventions and trainings, with an emphasis on supporting youth in foster care and Indigenous communities. And we're also delighted to have her lend her expertise in improving foster, adoptive, and kinship parent preparation to a CDC grant that Dr. Michelle Kuhn has submitted. Dr. Day's work has spanned multiple states and tribal communities, impacting policy as well as scientific knowledge and clinical treatment development. So we are very grateful to Dr. Day for sharing her expertise with us today. And please join me in welcoming her.
Thank you so much. All right, so I think I'm going to share screen myself, and then we'll get started here. There we go. And you all can see the PowerPoint? Good, awesome. All right. The first thing I want to do, because I am a community-based researcher, and I think hearing from the voices of those who participated in this project as a way to kick it off is one of the most impactful ways. And so first on this slide, I wanted you all to see the website link. So I'm going to be talking about NTDC, or National Training and Development Curricula. This is a nationally developed foster and adoptive parent training. It's used for both pre-licensure training for those looking to become foster parents, as well as for maintenance hours for those who have become licensed already. And so everything that I'm going to show you and talk about today, you actually will have access to via this website, ntdcportal.org. So I wanted to make sure you were aware of that. This is a free open access curricula, and I'm excited to tell you more about the components of this curricula and what we've learned since implementation, and to help you understand how it's being used across the country today. So I'm going to start off having you hear from the community members who helped make this possible, who participated in the pilot, in the evaluation of this project, to make this the best curriculum that it could be. So I'm going to play this short video for you to as a way to get you as excited about this as I am.
For us, I think NTDC was truly life-changing.
I feel like a whole nother side of my brain has opened up.
It opens your eyes to things you just don't know.
It's helped in tons of different ways.
Introducing the National Training and Development Curriculum, a new, state-of-the-art, no-cost curriculum to empower foster, adoptive, and kinship families throughout their parenting journey.
When you're looking for a curriculum that really helps you understand what trauma is, how to parent a child of a different race and of a different culture, how to parent a child who identifies as LGBTQ+. NTDC is it. It's a curriculum that really talk about the importance of reunification and the importance of working together as a partner with a birth parent to get their kids home. I love the flexibility of it. We have modified it to fit what our state child welfare needs. And there's no curriculum that I know of that can say, you can take what we've built and make it your own.
Parenting children is difficult. Parenting somebody else's kids is extra hard. And when you have trauma, grief, and loss on top of it, it takes a different set of skills and a different toolbox.
It's not going to be your traditional ways of parenting. It's a new way of thinking.
NTDC is a relatable curriculum. We hear from a wide variety of individuals about their actual experience so that we can learn directly from them.
A lot of times we were like this.
Oh,
like,
that's why she
gosh,
does that.
That's why she does that.
It is trauma-informed.
When we learned about the behaviors and why it was happening, I was really blown away by just seeing that it wasn't just me.
Oh my gosh, is this normal?
That it was a lot of other people's story too.
I see it in my kids where, oh, I know this. I saw that. I saw the video of that. Now I know how to react to that. Okay, kid, I got you.
The curriculum is very current, very up-to-date.
Research-based.
Well-structured and well-written.
There's podcasts that families can access 24/7. There's videos that they can access 24/7.
NTDC is dynamic.
It teaches you that this is going to be a journey of learning.
I know that I'm going to see growth from the families I'm working with. I know that I'm going to see those light bulb moments.
Being able to learn from Dr. Bruce Perry and from other experts is really valuable.
There is no perfect parent, ever.
Regulate, relate, and then reason.
has a self-assessment component, it has a classroom component, and then the right time training.
And having the flexibility to be able to move certain themes around that make sense for your particular county or your particular CPA.
It's interactive.
You have activity in the middle of lecture, you have podcasts, you have videos.
It gives a lot of great information in a variety of ways.
It's so real, so alive, and so useful and practical.
It speaks to the heart, but it also engages the mind.
It is totally free to use, and it's available. Everybody needs this training. Anybody who's working with children.
Not just our foster and adoptive parents. It is really a gift to everyone.
Something that is comprehensive, flexible, that you can take it and just run with it and support your families. I mean, what else can we ask for?
Thank you for watching that video. I feel like our community members who are passionate about this can promote it even better than I can. I had the great privilege of being the lead evaluator for this project. And there were many, many partners that really made this happen and made this the best it can be. And you got to see some of our content experts. And I know you all are really focused on, trauma-focused interventions. And so you got to see Heather Forbes and Dr. Bruce Perry, who were our trauma experts that really provided the trauma-specific content. And you'll, as you go through this website, you'll be able to really see all of that amazing detail. There are 19 themes that make up NTDC, that classroom portion. 2 of our 19 themes are really focused on, trauma-informed parenting and being able to understand and recognize trauma-induced behaviors. And so those are some of our topics. You'll get to see a few more of those as we continue to dialogue about this curricula. But before I move on, I do want to say, in terms of how did we build this so that there's attentiveness to many different populations, because there are a lot of folks that come into foster and adoptive parenting for many reasons, and there are different needs for different types of parents. And so we were very conscientious into the design of this curricula to be attuned to all of those different stakeholder groups. So as you go on the NTDC portal website, you're going to see that we have curriculum that's been tailored for children that are being cared for in public child welfare agencies. I'm going to spend most of my time today on that particular piece. But I also want you to know that there's an entire curriculum that was adapted specifically for use in tribal communities and tribes who work specifically with American Indian, Alaskan Native families. That particular curriculum, we had 16 tribal members across the different Children's Bureau regions help us design it. So we actually have a regionally specific tribal content, not just one size fits all tribal content, which makes our tribal adapted version of NTDC the most unique you will see of any federally funded tribally adaptive curriculum, because of the intentionality of regional sensitivity. You will also see on the website, we have a version of this curriculum specifically for parents who adopt intercountry adoption. We have a version for parents who adopt through the private domestic adoption process.
My pencil box is perfect. Yeah.
Okay, and then we also have a version specifically for those parenting children in a kinship care arrangement. So those are all the different versions of NTDC that exist. And so I wanted to alert you to that and to really encourage you all to really take some time looking through this website, because there is a lot of structure, again, that is attuned to various stakeholder difference. There we go. As you heard in the video, there are 3 major components that make up NTDC. We have our parent self-assessment tool, This particular tool we have done reliability and validity testing on. This particular tool, each piece of the self-assessment aligns with the different characteristics and competencies that are taught in this curricula, and that it's designed that folks can actually use subcategories of the self-assessment. You can use it in its entirety. You can use one section depending on how you're teaching it. The idea of the self-assessment is to coach our families to understand what are their natural strengths and what are their challenges. And so it's to really help our foster parents understand how they can become better critical consumers of the training that they're in. Because we know that different people come with different levels of strengths and different levels of weaknesses. And so they can tailor their learning across these different 19 themes. Different states have different numbers of licensing training hour requirements, right? And so families have the ability to self-select into different pieces for maintenance training hours based on their self-assessment scores, with the idea that these parents have the ability to be in the driver's seat, to have tailored learning that fits what their specific needs are. And so that's an exciting feature of this particular curriculum, and sets it apart from other foster and adoptive parent trainings that exist. For our classroom-based training, we had the challenge of having COVID hit, like right after we developed this awesome in-person classroom-based training. COVID hit, and we were tasked by the Children's Bureau to redesign it for a fully remote training experience. So we now have it available in both versions. What you're going to see in terms of the evaluation results today are the results from the virtual-based version. We are in the thick of finalizing our in-person post-COVID, trying to get back to previous life now. So we will have that evaluation done in September of 2024. So we're exciting to see if we see even greater effects with in-person versus virtual, but we're excited about what we've seen. And our curriculum experts really were challenged quite a bit in helping us understand how to take the activities that were in the original design for in-person, and how do you make those doable and fun and just as interactive in a virtual classroom platform. And so we're excited again about how that turned out. And we had tons of community feedback in terms of how well that transition went, and how to really make it work in that remote platform. And then finally, our right time. This is what we are focused on, our maintenance hours. So this is, we call it right time because it's focused on after a foster or adoptive parent has a child in their home. It's what do you need in the moment when you're experiencing a parenting challenge with a child in your home. And so these are all online video-based learnings that also comes with different activity workbooks that folks can use to support planning with the specific children that they have in their care. And so it's really about how do we build skills at the moment which our families need, because as many of you know who are parenting curriculum developers and trainers, is that oftentimes in licensing training we have many hours, right? Most states have an average of between like 24 and 30 hours of required pre-licensure training before a foster parent can be licensed. That's a whole lot of information that you're cramming into somebody's head all at once, right? And we know based on adult learning that we'll be lucky if people can retain 10% of that, right? And so these right time trainings are built to say, we acknowledge and anticipate that you're not going to remember all of these details from your pre-service training at the moment you need to rely on them. And many parents, because of all that cramming, when they're in the moment, don't remember that they've had training on that, even if they have. And so right time is about, this is available to you in the moment that you need it. And so you were hearing some things in the video about one of those a foster parent said, oh, I watched this video and yes, now I know how to deal with that behavior. And that's the whole point of Right Time, is right, giving people the skills and knowledge at the moment they need it. The skills that you need can change drastically as your child developmentally grows from infancy through teenagehood, and that what you need to know and what you need to focus on is going to change over time. And this Right Time component of the training really is mindful and acknowledges that. And so I'm excited to show you a little bit more about those content topics. Again, the ideas, where did we get the ideas and the priorities of what's in pre-service and what's in Right Time? We asked young people who used to be in foster care. We asked, child welfare workers. We asked, seasoned foster parents, kinship caregivers. So we asked them, what are these topics that you needed and when do you wish you would have gotten them? And we tailored this curriculum based on those lived experience voices. And you'll see that we drew on those lived experience voices in every single one of these themes, both in the classroom-based training and in the Right Time training. It was truly designed to be not just professionals, although we love our professionals, as I called out our Heather Forbes and our Bruce Perrys, we love them. But equally as those lived experience folks helping to really make it more concrete for our families. And so this curriculum is designed to really focus on concrete application of these knowledge principles that our amazing professionals and experts are helped us understand that they're important, but how to apply it in a concrete way. These lived experience voices, I think, really just took this training to a whole new level to make it more applicable for families rather than just theoretical, which is the complaint we heard when we were collecting information on, how can we improve upon curriculums that have already existed. So these are the characteristics that we measure in our self-assessment tool. And as I explained before, each of these have their own independent questions so that you can measure these independently or all at the same time. Each of these particular characteristics are embedded in each of the classroom-based and Right Time themes. And they're called out to the family so they can directly see the connection between these best practice parenting characteristics and their learning throughout the various pieces of the curriculum. Again, these characteristics, we collected them both through a systematic literature review as well as through these interviews with all of these different stakeholder experts that said, these are the characteristics of foster families who hang in there and stick with it. And so that's what we were trying to do is make sure that we're training those things that our lived experts told us were really important for parenting success. So we have many, many different ways in which the curriculum is taught, and many different types of modalities that are used to support parents with generating these new knowledge-based themes. And so in our classroom-based training and in our Right Time training, we use many different things. We have podcasts, we have video clips, we have research experts, and we utilize the best knowledge available through these different articles. And so it is really about how do we utilize all of the different teaching methods that exist to create this toolbox of learning for our families who participate in the NTDC training. And then in terms of the self-assessment, the goal of this, again, is to help families understand what are their strengths and weaknesses going into training. But we also use the self-assessment for them being able to see their own self-growth over time. So for the purpose of this pilot, we had them take the self-assessment before any exposure to classroom-based training and Right Time training. And then we had them take the self-assessment again 90 days after the training experience is over. So based on our interviews with our states, that's about the time that it takes after after training and after licensure to approximately get a child into someone's home. So we wanted them to understand after they had their first placement of a child, you know, how did that work? Did this training have stick power, right? In the moment that they actually needed it. And so that is the design. And for the second self-assessment, we really encouraged our foster families to say, if you still have things in here that are identified in the self-assessment as challenges, we encourage them to seek out specific content to support them to build on those skills as part of their maintenance hours training. And so it's about teaching foster parents not just to grab any training for the sake of getting their training hours in, but to teach them to be critical consumers and in the driver's seat of their learning. For the classroom-based training, I said 19 themes earlier. We have one theme that is online theme, but it is trained during the classroom-based training. And so 20 themes altogether. The one online theme is the Child Welfare 101 that each of the states really tailor to their own state rules and policy guidelines for foster parenting. And so that one is an online based one that we encourage states to adapt and modify to fit their specific state requirements. As you heard in the video, this is designed in a modular design. States could teach these in whatever order they wanted to. They could also choose which particular themes would be in their pre-service training versus their maintenance hour training. For the pilot, they all had to train it as pre-service, but for the as soon as the data collection was over, they had the ability to split it up in the ways that were best for them.
Yeah. Really no.
The classroom-based training
wait, she's
is
sleeping.
Sorry, I'm getting.
I'm so sorry, David.
Let her sleep, bro.
We can hear you.
Okay, I muted him. Sorry.
No, it's okay. For the classroom-based training, even though it is virtual-based, it is not designed to be an asynchronous training. You do need a live trainer, on Zoom or what other live platform that folks use. So it is designed to be facilitator led, whether it's in person or virtual. For the purposes of the evaluation, we have some sites that are in person only, some sites that are virtual. We did not allow hybrid to have both happening until after our pilot sites were through the evaluation process. But many of them have chosen hybrid models to teach this, where they teach some of them in some modules in person, some virtually, to provide more flexibility to make attending a foster parent training easier for families, as many states have goals that they're setting for recruitment numbers for foster families in their states. For the classroom-based training, as part of the evaluation, we measured competencies for knowledge gain. We also have measures for attitude changes, both before and after training. And then we have assessments for whether or not they actually learned the specific skills that were taught in the curriculum, and their ability in being able to apply those skills in the parenting setting. I talked about right time already, about it being accessing information at the parenting milestone moment in which families need that information. We have 15 right time themes. These are self-contained content, and these are all asynchronous. The maintenance hours are asynchronous, which is our states who participated really love this. And so many of them have chosen to move these right time trainings on their own MLS knowledge learning systems, or they can continue to use them off of the Spalding for Children website, which is the agency that houses the NTDC website. What's great about right time training is there's flexibility for families to use it in so many ways. You can watch it by yourself, in your pajamas right before bed. You can watch it with your partner, and then talk with each other about how you're processing and how you would apply that information, parent to parent. And then after our pilot evaluation was over, we started talking with states about utilizing right time training as curricula for support groups that are run for foster and adoptive parents. And so that is really just now kicking off. And we're excited to hear more from our states on the utility of utilizing right time training as part of support group infrastructure. So now I'll jump in to the evaluation component, or the part that I had the greatest role in this curricula. So first I want to go over who our participants were. Our pilot was pretty large. So these are all of the states and tribal communities that participated in the pilot. So we had Colorado, Kansas, Georgia, Missouri, Illinois. Those were all of our virtual states that did the virtual implementation of NTDC. We had 2 tribal communities that implemented this: Salt River, Pima, Maricopa Indian community in Arizona. They implemented this virtually as a pre-licensing curricula for their foster and adoptive parents. And then EBCI stands for Eastern Band of Cherokee Indians in North Carolina. They chose to focus implementing this with kinship caregivers as a way to increase the number of kinship caregivers who become licensed. And so those 2 tribes had different goals and used it in very different ways. And then our states of Maine and the Virgin Islands, they were not formal pilot sites. So they actually were our 2 earliest adopter sites that, although they were not part of the pilot, they started implementing right after we finalized the curriculum in our final version. And so they were our earliest adopting places and also gave us feedback. And then Oregon and Florida were our face-to-face pilot sites that were implementing it in the original way that we designed it before we had to rush to do a virtual transition because of COVID. So this is one of the things that's really important when you're implementing a training, is really looking at, how are we training and retaining people. Our ASP, when I say that is our intercountry and private domestic folks. So were private agencies that specifically support intercountry adoptive parents and private domestic adoption parents. And so just so you can kind of see who we supported over time. And I think what's really important to understand is we went into this assuming, based on the national literature, that we might see a 50% dropout rate of those who start training versus those who actually complete. And we wanted to see does the way that we train impact people who stay and complete training versus those, who kind of start the process but don't hang with it. And remember, these are numbers for our the folks who did the virtual based training. Florida did both because they're so huge. We had a section of Florida that did the virtual and another section of Florida doing face-to-face. But one of the things that you'll see is we compared NTDC, which is our intervention, to another region in our pilot sites that had the service as usual curricula that they had before they worked with us. And so you can see the numbers of folks that were served in each of those groups. And one of the things we were excited about is, consistently across sites, we saw that the dropout rate in NTDC curriculum was lower than the dropout rate in the service as usual. And so we are excited about the interactive nature and the flexibility of the curricula, made it easier for folks to not only commit, but to finish. And so that was a finding that our pilot sites were very, very excited about. And again, that rang true both for our public child welfare sites as well as our tribal nations. Our inter-country private domestic sites did not have a comparison group, so we don't have data for that population. Okay. So there were several different things that we were measuring as part of our outcome evaluation that we were really excited to see. So we had some knowledge assessment questions for NTDC, and then we also asked those same questions for our families that were in the service as usual curricula. And so we saw in terms of the particular knowledge areas, and we focused on the knowledge areas that were in both curriculums, NTDC and the service as usual, on whether on the level of those gains from pre to post. And we saw that for our NTDC families that we had statistically significantly greater gains in those knowledge assessment areas compared to our service as usual families. We saw statistically significantly higher gains for our NTD families in terms of our trauma-informed parenting skill, being able to understand and recognize what a trauma behavior was and how to manage those. We saw statistically significant differences in terms of understanding child development indicators in our foster child development subscale. We saw statistically significantly greater gains for NTDC families in our challenging children subscale. Again, that one is also about managing behavior. So we're really seeing that attention to trauma-informed curricular components really shining through in NTDC. Confidence to care for children. We saw significantly better outcomes for our NTDC families, particularly in parenting children 6 to 12 and in parenting teenagers. We did not see that same for early childhood. And so I think as a whole, what we're understanding through this is that some of our service as usual curriculums have spent more time on the early childhood aspects and less time on other developmental stages. And so we had great intentionality based on our lived experience experts to make sure that our curriculum was designed in a way that we were attuned to all the developmental stages of parenting. And then finally, statistically significant differences between NTDC families and service as usual with regards to preparation to care for teenagers in particular. That one was a big finding. And that was one that many of our lived experience experts told us, is that parenting teenagers is a whole nother ball game, and that there are very specific things you need to know. And so we had great intention of making sure that content was there based on those lived experience experts who said this was something that they felt like they didn't get when they went through licensure training. And then in the right, you'll see 3 other scales where for NTDC, we saw approaching statistical significance, but not a statistical significance. Again, the early childhood piece. And then also that receptivity to birth families. And that was our co-parenting measure to see how comfortable foster parents are with parenting with birth parents. And so that is a relatively new focus that the Children's Bureau has had, is on helping foster parents understand their role as being a support to birth parents, right? Historically, in terms of foster and adoptive parent recruitment, foster parents often were told as part of the recruitment process that it's faster, you can adopt faster if you're a foster parent first. And it was really focused on keeping birth parents and foster parents completely separate from one another, right? And so we have this new paradigm shift change in thinking about how birth parents and foster parents interact with each other. And so And so that is something that I would say, as far as parenting curriculums in the future, that we need to continue to have intentional direction and intervention based around co-parenting. Okay, so another piece that we saw in our control group that was different than NTDC, where our outcomes were better for our control caregivers, is that this idea about having second thoughts after being exposed to curriculum. Did that help people think about whether or not this was the right time for them to be a foster parent in their lives, versus how do you fit that in with all the other things you have going on in your life? Because one of the things that can be harmful, right, is foster parents who think they can do it. They get a kid in their home and then they realize they can't. And then we have a placement disruption, and that can actually cause more trauma to children, right? In addition to the trauma they've already been exposed to prior to removal. And so that's an important consideration to be thinking about, is whether or not a curriculum can really help people self-select out, right? How do we prevent that additional trauma from happening to children once they enter care? And so the intentionality of how can we help foster parents think about their readiness to be foster parents, and is this the right time for them to be doing this work? So some of the other outcomes, one of the things we wanted to look at is historically, we have a lot more folks who go through licensing process, become licensed, versus those who actually agree to take a child into their home. Many folks who sign up to be a foster or adoptive parent have this dream about what the perfect foster kid is for them, what that foster kid looks like, waiting for a kid that looks like them, right? And so one of the things that we spend a lot of time talking about in NTC is, who are children in foster care? And if you're signing up to do this, who should you anticipate having as a child in your home? So just some data on the percentage of caregivers, who after licensure agreed to take a child in their home. And then next you'll see here that we were really excited about is our NTDC caregivers were overall less picky about who the child was that they took in their home. So you can see that our NTDC families were 3.8 times more likely to accept a child who identified as having Asian American heritage, 2.1 times more likely to take a child who identified as having American Indian, Alaska Native heritage, 1.7 times more likely to take a child who identifies as Hispanic or Latinx, and you'll see all of these different things. And white, slightly less likely. Why? Because they weren't waiting for the child that looked like them. The vast majority of our foster parents are white, right? And so many foster parents are waiting for that child that looks like them. And in our study, they were more accepting of who was actually in the system and not waiting for that perfect child that looks like them. And so these are our permanency outcomes for our intervention versus comparison group participants. So for our NTDC families, we saw that they were 2.9 times more likely these kids to experience guardianship as their permanency option. What's important to understand about guardianship is guardianship doesn't involve termination of parental rights, right? There's that acknowledgement that continued family connections as part of cultural continuity, and relational permanency is just as important as legal permanency. And so this acknowledgement of that. So we saw a lot of families that were open to the idea of that adoption is a great form of permanency, but so is guardianship. And so that idea. And you'll see that also with adoption, we saw many more kids that were placed that ended up being adopted. And so this idea that families were adequately prepared to have children in their home and that the children that they accepted, they stuck with, right? And that's a really important implication of this study. So I talked about the self-assessment already, and I know I'm a little bit worried about time, so I'm going to go a little bit quicker through these slides here. But this is kind of what we were encouraging our families to think about as they were completing the self-assessment tool. And I apologize for how small this this slide is, but what you're seeing here is the baseline scores on the self-assessment before training exposure and 90 days after training ended, so that you can see the difference. And across all of the themes outside of kinship parenting, we saw statistically significant changes in attitudes towards foster parenting and these types of principles, which was really wonderful. I would say that I would think the reason we didn't see kinship parenting is most of our sites chose not to include kinship parenting as or kinship caregivers in their pilot site, only because many sites have way less training hours for kinship than they do non-relative foster parents. So we had many folks use the kinship parenting curriculum, but for counting them in the evaluation, they didn't, because of we required if they were in the pilot site to use all of the curricula, because we wanted, you know, to be able to make sure that all of their families were getting the same dosage of the intervention. And so kinship parenting for that one not to show, I think it's just because there was a lot less people enrolled. So this is the data for our characteristics from baseline to 90 days after licensing was over. And again, you can see here a lot of changes in attitudes and beliefs in all of these different characteristic areas, all changed statistically significantly different from baseline to 90 days after. So one of the important things we wanted to measure, because as you see, we have so many different pilots going on across so many different states, that we wanted to make sure that we had some structure in the evaluation to be attuned to fidelity to the curricula intervention. And remember, we allowed flexibility for sites in terms of the order in which the curriculum was trained, but they still had to train all of it as part of the requirement to be in the pilot site. And so we saw overall across all of our pilot sites that they were able to complete 93% of all of the curricular activities that were in part of the curriculum. With across all pilot sites, only 7% didn't. Only 7% of activities were not completed. And so the greatest adherence to fidelity was our impact of substance use module. We had 97% compliance. Our lowest one adherence to fidelity was our effective communication module, where we had 87% fidelity adherence. And then in terms of training time, we as our national curriculum developers were really great in estimating the hours over time. So most of our themes were trained with plus or minus 10 minutes of what the national training team expected it was going to take. There was one particular theme that was taking much more time than the national curriculum developers expected, and that was the accessing services and supports. Many of our sites took the time to do site-specific services and supports, which greatly increased the amount of time it took to do that theme. So as a whole, we asked the caregivers who participated how they felt about the curricula, and we asked them to talk about pacing of it, the relevancy of the curricula, how engaging it was, what they thought of the group activities, and how they felt about the training facilitator who was training in their site. 6 is the highest score that could be given, which is, you know, the best thing ever that they could have ever experienced. And so we had a lot of people who were super excited about the design of the curriculum in all of these different ways, pacing, relevance, engagement, interactiveness with the group activities, and then the quality and ability of their trainer to relay the information. Okay, I'm going to skip through some slides because I'm worried about time. For our pre-post classroom findings, we did an assessment, a pre and a post for every single one of our themes. And you'll see here that the stars are where we saw statistically significant gains from pre to post in knowledge. And this is specific to knowledge gains. And you'll see that there are certain themes where we saw the greatest attentiveness to change in knowledge. And I think you'll be really excited to see some of these. You'll, for example, creating a stable, nurturing, safe home environment. We saw a 21 point average change in score on that particular one, which is really about setting up the home to feel safe for children. We saw wonderful gains in cultural humility. We had a lot of attention to cultural difference and cross trans racial parenting. We saw some really great gains in impact of substance use, and the impact of substance use on parenting children who were in homes exposed to substance use. Maintaining children's connections. That was that emphasis on co-parenting that we were trying to relay. Mental health considerations. We had a 48% change. And, you know, again, this is our amazing content, thanks to our Bruce Perry and our Heather Forbes experts and our lived experience, people talking about how do you apply that concretely. And so unbelievable changes from pre to post in that particular area. And you'll see our trauma-informed behavior and our trauma-informed parenting and our trauma-related behavior. Again, massive gains because of the intention we took embedding trauma-informed knowledge throughout this curricula, and those pieces really stuck with our families. Similar to our classroom-based training, our right time evaluation showed great competency gains and high satisfaction as well in the asynchronous curricula. And so this is what you'll see here. As you see, asynchronous learning, you do tend to have less gains from pre to post, just because when people are doing asynchronous training, sometimes you're multitasking and you could be doing other things. So people tend to not be as attuned to training, when they're doing it independently and asynchronously, which is why we really emphasize the classroom-based training, even in a virtual-based setting, to be live person training. But we understand the utilityness of being able to access things anytime. The one theme that we saw a lot of change was our sexual development and identity. This is, again, this piece where we're emphasizing that content for teenagers and understanding identity development in adolescence. And so this particular one was really focused on that particular developmental age. And again, a lot of aha moments. We get a lot of amazing qualitative feedback from folks who watch the asynchronous training in terms of things that they didn't really understand prior to exposure to that particular knowledge area. The other thing that's really interesting with our right time training, we only required our pilot sites as part of this training to just to go through at least one right time training theme for the evaluation rather than all 15. And the sites and the families got to choose whichever one they wanted to train on. And so this is giving you an idea of when families self-select in to training, what was the most popular one that they were exposed to? So this family dynamics was the most popularly chosen one, with sexual trauma being the second highest most. So you can kind of see the popularity of these asynchronous themes. So this is just a little commercial for our, we created, and again, we are still actively evaluating this, is using right time training in support groups. And so we are just launched on our website this training guide specifically for support group leaders to train our right time training themes in that capacity. Again, the idea is to push some more live discussion of right time, because we saw lower scores pre to post than when it was completely asynchronous, to allow for right time to be used in a live learning structure. Now, I'm a policy person in addition to an interventionist. So I know when you were introduced to me, you had learned that I used to work for Congress. So it's really important to me in my work that my research is connected to policy implications and practice, not only for scaling up, but for how can we make sure that this information and this knowledge gets in the hands of those who are in decision-making power, in terms of the ability to scale up and support other states to be able to do this work. And so I want to help you understand how we connected the dots for states to help them understand how engaging with this curricula, even if they weren't a pilot site, was really in their best interest. And so we helped states understand how NTDC could help them be in compliance with federal regulations that they had to be doing regardless of whether they were using NTDC or not. And so as part of the Fostering Connections to Success and Increasing Adoptions Act, all states are required to do specialized supports for kinship caregivers. And so we have a kinship specific adapted version of NTDC I told you about, including 2 exclusive themes that should be trained only with kinship caregivers. They would be less relevant to non-relative folks. And then we have a guide that talks about, based on our kinship caregivers, we interviewed which of those modules that kinship caregivers felt really spoke to them or were relevant to them, and that we've packaged that for states. NTDC, again, is designed to be flexible, so states, tribes, and territories can tailor the training to meet the needs of their state's licensing requirements for training relatives, and it can also be offered in person or remotely. Remember, unlike non-relative caregivers, relatives are starting their training after they have kids placed in their home, not before. And so they really need that flexibility in order to feel like licensing can be a reality for them. The other important part about this training is Kinship Navigator, which is one of the Family First Prevention Service Act interventions. That caregiver education is a part of implementing that federal policy. And as part of implementing Kinship Navigator, caregiver education is one of those suggested essential components of Navigator programming. And so this curriculum can really be literally picked up by Kinship Navigator program and used without them having to spend time recreating curricula for that purpose. Another thing is, this federal law requires that states have to provide high quality training for foster and adoptive parents, and that this training was specifically designed to be used along the developmental curriculum, and that this can be trained like a Lego model, right? You can pick and choose what can be pre-service, what can be maintenance, the order of the trainings, because they all are standalone. And so it has great flexibility, and that it can be taught to be attuned, right, with those specific needs that are rising up, based on caregiver self-assessment scores. And so this is another way to be in compliance with these federal laws. And then Families First. This is where all child welfare agencies across the country are really fixated on this policy and how do you implement it well. in your particular site. And so NTDC helps cover all of these areas under the Family First Prevention Services Act of 2018. And it's really about helping states be able to articulate to the feds, how are you sufficiently training and preparing foster and adoptive parents with high quality parenting experiences. Findings from NTDC evaluation indicate that NTDC trained families were more likely to accept older youth in placement, which means higher numbers of youth are being placed in family-based settings, and we were reducing placement in congregate care, right? That is a mandate that all states have to be able to do. And through our evaluation, we were able to demonstrate that. We also showed through the evaluation that families who went through NTDC were more likely to accept placements of children with more challenging behaviors. So NTDC prepares prospective foster and adoptive parents to feel more prepared to do that, right? And again, these are the kids that are often shuffled in congregate care settings. So it's this idea of how can states answer the call to reducing congregate care placements. Well, NTDC could be one of those things that they can use to fulfill that federal requirement. The other major piece that states have to do in terms of drawing down Title 40 dollars is they have to be able to demonstrate these particular outcomes in their child family service review process. So these are their agreements with the federal government in exchange for these formula funds. So all states have to talk about in their CFSRs, how are children doing related to permanency, stability in their living situations. NTDC families had a greater ability of providing permanency and less placement mobility for children. Our second outcome, the continuity of family relationships and connections, right? The more willingness to do that co-parenting, to be committed to relational permanency, cultural permanency, and maintaining those connections with birth families. And then finally, that well-being outcome of families having enhanced capacity to provide for their children's needs and being able to demonstrate that through NTDC. Another piece of the CFSR that NTDC fits so well in is the piece on staff and provider training system functioning, right? That this can be easily transferred into states' LMS systems. I talked about that a little bit earlier. So it can meet all of these continuing education requirements that states have to verify that they can provide as part of their system infrastructure. And that we are showing that NTDC has good stick power. And here are some of these other items, again, that NTDC can meet on behalf of states. So instead of states having to spend time being able to develop this themselves, they have this nice packaged curriculum they can pull off the shelf to be able to answer these requirements on behalf of their federal state partnership agreements. In addition to the CFSR, this final piece is the federal government released an information memorandum on national model foster family home licensing standards. So this was released about a year after the Family First Prevention Services Act was signed into law to give greater clarity to states on what does compliance with this federal law looks like. And so one of the things outlined in the information memorandum are these specific training requirements. And so NTDC checks all of these boxes in this information memorandum for states. So the exciting part is now that we have clearly have great data to show the impact of NTDC. We have combed through policies, both executive branch policy as well as congressional policies, to understand how NTDC fits in. And now what we want to know is, to what extent have we been able to disseminate NTDC nationwide? So I'm super excited to show you this. So you saw who our original pilot sites were. Again, NTDC didn't exist, until we launched it in 2020, right during when COVID hit. And so knowing that this program didn't launch until 2020, and we are only in 2024 now, that we have successfully expanded the use of NTDC almost nationwide. And so the dark green is every state that is actively implementing NTDC as we speak. The light green sites are states who are working with us now on an implementation plan for NTDC. And then the gray states are those who are not quite there to have the discussion, although I can tell you Washington finally came to the table, and you can, as someone who is a resident of Washington State, and I'm sitting at the University of Washington implementing, being the lead evaluator of this training, you can imagine my frustration of having my own home state not want to be on the forefront of this. But we are finally entering conversations with the state of Washington now. So I guess I could put them in light green right now. But we're excited about how fast we've been able to implement this. And I know all of you who are doing research here know that on average, for an intervention from pilot site completion until it becomes common practice, sometimes can take 20 years. And so our intentionality of making sure that we are developing our findings in ways that are getting in decision maker hands beyond publishing just for publisher perish in journals, because let's be honest, you all, that's really speaking to the choir, that our intentionality of creating documents that are friendly for decision makers, we have with lightning speed disseminated NTDC very quickly. Like I said, we just started planning for NTDC 7 years ago. So we can say that intentionality of the dissemination piece has allowed us to disseminate this at 3 times the speed of general intervention dissemination work historically. And so I'm a big fan and spend a lot of intentionality designing materials for decision makers as part of my process as a researcher. And then I talked about, the adaptations and the intentionality of wanting to make sure that we are also doing things. And I do a lot of work in tribal communities, and that piece is very important to me personally. And so you'll see here the movement we had in implementing the tribally adapted version across the United States. So you'll see the states that are in the dark purple. Those are states where we have tribal nations that are already implementing NTDC actively in those communities. And then you'll see the light purple are states in which we have active engagement going on with tribal nations who are working on planning for implementation of the tribally adapted version in those states. And then the gray states are those where we don't yet have connections with tribes that are working with us on NTDC. But you'll see the process, because of we honor tribal sovereignty and tribal right to self-determination, that those are not conversations we're having through states, but that we're having directly with tribal communities. All right. And so now I want to take some time and I know there's a structured way for Q&A, so I want to hand this back to our leadership team here so that you can help provide some guidelines on how you would like Q&A to go.
Dr. Day, thank you so much for that talk. There's just been wows happening in the chat all the way through your talk. And I just want to echo that the outcomes are absolutely incredible, especially for the breadth of individuals, both geographically and relationally, that you're serving. Wow. So we have a couple of questions in the chat, but I also want to encourage people to raise their hand and come off mute and ask questions. Early on, Ben Moore was asking if this training has been made accessible in plain language for foster parents who may have IDD or other disabilities or I'll just add who are neurodivergent. And if there's any considerations, if there isn't like a whole other curriculum that you would suggest just thinking about with those families.
Absolutely. As part of working with the federal government, we were required to design NTDC to be ADA compliant. And so all of the trainings and the videos all have, you know, for the deaf and hard of hearing community, it can all be read. And we absolutely structured and utilized our lived experience resource parent voice in practical application. And so as I described before, we did not want this to be a theoretical training, that we really wanted this to be concrete. And so we really relied heavily on our lived experts to really help co-design. And we took everything our resource parents said to heart in terms of all of the changes that needed to be done to make this as clear as possible. And all of those changes in the all those recommendations, I should say, within the pilot have all been made. And so great care was being done to do that. So I'm super excited for those of you who are experts on disability to take a look and tell us, you know, do you feel like we did that in the best way possible? And I think our entire team is interested in always learning how we can do that even better.
Just a thank you from Ben in the chat, and Carice, one of our autism postdocs, was also just saying thank you for considering that. And I just want to echo your call to action for people to review the curriculum and think about it through everyone's unique lenses. But man, it sounds like it's already pretty comprehensive, and building with communities is always a good way to make sure that communities are being served. So wonderful. There was also a question here just about Washington not yet implementing. Gosh, that's got to be frustrating.
There are politics, and you know, it's interesting because my competition, if I'm gonna use air quotes, is the alliance, which actually shares my home in social work. And so I think, you know, when you're talking about this, you know, it can sometimes cause people to be upset if they feel like you're infringing on their territory. And the alliance, you know, has the foster and adoptive parent training contract with the state. And so I think that, you know, in their own self-preservation, advocating for maintaining their own curriculum was important for that team. So I understand that. You know, I have only lived in Seattle for 7 years when I first started this, and they've been here forever. So I understand that's a tightrope to walk. They have finally started conversations on NTDC in Washington State. So that is something that I think is moving forward. I'm hoping that Washington will accept it all and not just pieces, but we're just now starting those conversations.
And I think Megan Weldon was wondering if families in Washington State wanted to take advantage of the NTDC materials. Is the right time skills on the website the way to do that right now?
In Washington State, yes, because our state does not have it on their own training LMS website right now. So that would be the only way for Washingtonians to access it. But yes, it's free and open access. You can click on it right now.
That's wonderful. Just a thank you from Megan. And I think we'll, unless anyone wants to come off mute and ask a question, we'll end with Carol's question here. Going once. Okay. This may be difficult to do, Carol is saying, but can you use an example to highlight the content and how foster parents interact with and learn the information by topic? It's so rich and varied, so acknowledging they're likely all different.
Yeah, they are all different. And I will tell you that we actually had an activity that we had to remove because we wanted to help foster parents learn about trauma. And so we had an activity in there to help them see it. And it was so triggering for them, we were told that we needed to take it out. But one activity we call it the rope exercise. And so we talk about, children's trauma and how that manifests and how that feels when you have this whole new placement and meeting strangers. So the rope activity is something where we ask, a volunteer, to sit in a chair, and then the facilitator is talking about, various levels of trauma or things that a child may have experienced, both in care and maybe things that have maybe happened in care. And as the stories are being told, the person sitting in the chair is wrapped in a rope to have that feeling, because we know, being binded is a trauma thing, right? And so the practice of telling the stories, and you're watching somebody actually be binded in a rope as the stories are telling, our resource parents told us that was too triggering for them. And so the idea was to help them understand and feel a trauma trigger, right? But that was an example of an activity we had in the pilot that we had to remove because of too many folks said that it was too impactful, like it was too hard for them to have that experience. So another concrete activity we did to really talk about cultural humility, cultural connectedness, is to have our resource parents understand who is in their community, who do they regularly interact with, and then have them conscientiously see, are they engaging with folks who look like the children in their home, and are they providing opportunities for children to be around folks that look like them, sound like them, that share their cultural identity. So we call it the bead activity. And so we have different color beads, and that each bead represents a different race ethnic group. And so we ask a series of questions like, what's the race ethnicity of your doctor, of, the school principal, and then we just went through all the different, people that if you had a child in your home, you would be regularly engaging with, your friends, your family members, all of these different questions about who do you engage with on an everyday basis, so that they can, look at their cups and see, do you have the network that you need right now? Or do you need to rethink who should be in your network so that you're really helping young people promote relational and cultural permanency as part of that fostering experience? And so we used that activity to help raise some concrete awareness among folks about who is in your network and who isn't. Not that it's bad of who's in your network, but we wanted them to understand concretely who is and who isn't, and to help them think about that as part of that fostering experience. And that was a particularly moving activity. And a lot of folks were like, wow, I just never thought about that in my life before. And so I'm hoping I'm answering this question correctly, or in the way that the asker wanted me to, but those are just two concrete activities of how we bring the theoretical into the concrete now.
Perfect. Yeah, that was me asking Dr. Day, and that's exactly what I was hoping for, just like sort of helping to capture the richness of it, because it's so impressive and it's so broad. So just wanting, to connect with it on a more, discreet, like what are they actually doing when they're engaging with these materials. So thank you.
Mm-hmm.
I think with that, we are sadly at time, but thank you so much for your time this morning and sharing this incredible intervention. I think we're all walking away feeling very inspired and with lots of thoughts about how this impacts our daily work with foster and kinship caregivers. So thank you so much for your time.
Oh, you are absolutely welcome. And I will be very excited to see all of you exploring NTDC. And I am happy to have all of you provide extra pressure on our home state.
What's the best way to do that?
Move forward. I was going to say, as progressive as Washington is, I was disappointed that it was such a hard sell. And they're getting there. I don't fully know exactly how much they're going to accept within the curriculum, or how they're going to marry it with their existing efforts. But Any of you who work directly with, DCYF, it's really up to them. I think me trying to pitch it directly to the existing curriculum developers at the Alliance is not going to be the way to do this. So it's just really, connections, with all the folks that you work with at the state and county levels to make them aware of it. And if you all use your lens as trauma experts, to help them understand why something like this would be really important for the families that you see and serve every day in your practices, that I think you will have a powerful voice and lens to contribute to the conversation.
Great, thank you. It's good to know kind of concretely how to approach that, because you won't be surprised to know that we see a lot of kids in foster care in our mental health clinic, and I'm both super excited to have additional resources to alert them to and share the link to and look at myself and try to learn from. So.
And I'm so glad you said that, Carol, because one of the plugs I have is that we've been not part of the pilot, but having just introductory conversations with our states that have piloted NTDC, because one of the interesting qualitative findings that we got is in our states that did the pilot, that some of our resource parents say they actually feel like they know more than their workers do in terms of training, especially with a lot of the trauma content. And so our foster adoptive parents told us that we actually need to train the workers on this information, and that's a recommended next step. And so the idea of utilizing this training, we would love to see, you all expose some of this to your students, or engagement with other professionals. We'd love to hear more on whether or not that this could also be useful as a workforce training in addition to a foster and adoptive parent training. So we really haven't tested that out. And we would be really interested in understanding that recommendation from foster parents, if that would really improve engagement and making sure that workers are on the same page as our parents, because after all, it is workers that are supposed to be supporting those parents, right, in those parenting activities.
Yeah, that's great. I'm definitely bookmarking it. I'm going to explore it myself, and I hope other people in the audience are too. And I agree. Like,
Carol,
I had families.
This is Rebecca. Can I ask a quick question? About the implementation. So you were saying that that there's already something in place. Do you have data or information on the effectiveness of what's already in place? Because if we're going to advocate for something different and making a change, it would be nice to know what's already there, and so we can sort of advocate for the measured difference. Does that make sense?
It's a great question. And because of Washington wasn't in our pilot site, we didn't comb through their service as usual curricula. For all of our pilot sites, we actually wrote an article and we combed through all of their service as usual curricula and looked theme by theme. How does NTDC include or not include what each of their themes were? So we did that for every single pilot site. So we knew which ones had trauma content, which ones didn't, which ones had cultural content, and which ones didn't. But we didn't do that for Washington because they weren't part of our pilot. So if those of you already know, and you have all the information here, these slides are with your team now, that you can see what's in what's in NTDC, so that you are able to do those comparisons.
Well,
Great.
I want to be sorry, go ahead, Karen.
Yeah, go ahead. You go ahead and close for us, Michelle.
Great. I just want to be respectful of your time, Dr. Day. Thank you so much again. And thank you to everyone who came to listen to this wonderful talk.